Hello, and welcome to Lost and Found with Frankie, a podcast for young adults and teens who are just trying to figure out who they are whilst dealing with one of life's most devastating experiences, grief. I'm Frankie, and 10 years ago, when I was 13 years old, I lost my eldest brother, Matt. Like you're probably feeling now, I felt lost, alone, angry, and completely overwhelmed with sadness, and was just craving a space where I could go and feel comforted and understood. So this podcast is my way of creating that space for you, whilst opening up the taboo topic of grief, which so many of us experience. So if you're feeling lost on your journey with grief, hi, and welcome to this safe space. Thank you so much for being here with me today. You are not alone, and I hope that this podcast brings whatever it is that you're seeking on your journey. So let's get into it. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Lost and Found with Frankie. Thank you so much for being in this space with me today. So, for our second solo episode, I'm going to talk about, this might be a bit of a weird one because it's not really like grouped into like category. It's just a thing that I just feel like I want to talk about. Yeah, so I want to talk about those weird questions or like awkward moments that you have either yourself who's grieving with other people or other people, have asked you uncomfortable questions. I have one myself that I was thinking of. I did put a little story up and ask you guys if you've had any experiences that you would potentially want some guidance on if you're wanting to help someone who's grieving, or stories of if you are grieving and you've had those awkward encounters. In general, that grief is like, it's really touchy. People don't know how to go about it. As we're coming up to Christmas, especially sort of at this time. Yeah, it is hard to navigate in conversation, and I can fully respect that. But yeah, I just thought it would be really helpful to maybe chat through these sort of scenarios together. And I can tell you a bit about like my experience in times like this. So one I have is when people, I think I've said this on an episode before, I don't know if it would have come out yet, but when we first lost Matt, people would ask me, oh, how's your mum? And it would just make me like really annoyed, because I'd be like, yeah, my dad's not great actually. Like, why are you not asking after both of them? Like, they've both lost a child. And sometimes then people would be like to me to sort of help me understand it more. They'd go, oh, but they're a mum, so maybe they're asking in that sense. And I'm like, I get that. But it's just also quite uncomfortable, and it's quite painful for the person you're asking. Unless obviously they know them, you know them through your mum, I obviously can respect that. But it was people who don't really know you well, and it's just an awkward situation because sassy little me was like, oh, my dad's not great, thank you. That was my reply. Deadpan, excuse the, maybe. But yeah, that was my response. Because it was just uncomfortable, and it was just like hard question. And for some reason, it really, really annoyed me at the age of 13, 14, 15, whatever. So yeah, that's a tricky one. I think one big one I want to talk about in terms of my loss with Matt. I think when you lose someone really close to you and in your family unit, it's a very common question. I was speaking to my friend Ruby about this, and she has a lot, her dad passed away, and she has people ask her a lot, what does your mum do? What does your dad do? Like, they're very common, small talk questions. But you just don't realise in that moment what you're bringing up for that person. And yeah, we spoke about that a lot, because one I would get would be, oh, like, how many siblings do you have? Oh, awful, awful, awful. And I have one really specific memory of this. I was at school. I think I'd literally been back in school. I think it was my first day back to school after a week since Matt had passed. And I was in a lesson, and it was a maths lesson. And the teacher, lovely teacher, like I know she didn't mean anything by it, but it's just such a common thing you use. And I think we needed like a sort of question to help us with a maths equation, whatever. And it was like, all right, let's do how many siblings you all have. Let's go around the room, blah, blah, blah. And I was sat next to my friend Leah. We were at the same school. And I remember leaning over to her because it was the first time someone had confronted me with that question, that situation. And I genuinely remember asking her, what do I say? Like, I've got three. I will always have three siblings, but technically I've got two. And I was like, oh my God, we're in maths, so I've got to be technical and like, you know. And yeah, it was just the most uncomfortable situation I've ever been in. The teacher was lovely though and dealt with it quite well actually and passed over me and she went, Frankie, you've got three. She clocked it before she'd got to me that she'd sort of messed up asking that question, but dealt with it really well so I didn't have to answer, which thank God. But yeah, that was like horrible. And that's a really tough question I get all the time. Like when you start anything new, you meet anyone new, going to uni, you know, starting a job, like, oh, how many siblings do you have? I would always, my technique that I've mastered over the last 10 years, I always start at the bottom. As in, when I say bottom, I'm the youngest, Matt was the eldest, and then I have Harry and Georgia in between me and Matt. And I would always start with Harry and be like, oh, like I've got three siblings. Harry's doing blah, blah, blah. My sister, blah, blah, blah. And hope that like at some point in that conversation we'll tangent off into something about either one of my other siblings. And thank God for them. They are both very interesting people and doing really exciting things. So it usually does tangent off. Yeah. And then sometimes it doesn't. And you will really have people push for that last sibling. I'm not even lying. People be like, yeah, and what about your third sibling, elder sibling? What are they doing? I'm like, oh, you know, how old? Or they'll go, oh, how old is he? How old are they? I'll say he. Sorry, I'm really rambling because I guess it's like a bad memes. And yeah, anyway, then I will have people be really persistent on my last sibling, my third sibling, and they'll go, oh, so like your third sibling, what's he doing? Or what are they doing? And I just go, oh, well, he would have been 30, and then that would have, you know, people kind of go. And I'm like, oh, he passed away 10 years ago. And it's always just like, they don't know what to say. And then it's just like really awkward. And I'm sort of like, and yeah, it always confused me. I always just wonder, like, before I lost Matt, would I have been like that? Because I really try not to judge. I'm not judging. But in sometimes moments like that, I'm like, you can see I'm a bit awkward and like, don't really want to go there. And I'm rambling about the other siblings. Like, is that normal for people to do? Maybe take the hint that like, you know, and I do just wonder, like, would I persist to like know the full answer? I don't know, maybe I would. But yeah, that has always been a bit of a tricky question. And I still get it now, and I will probably get it for a really long time. Because I guess like siblings are usually around your age and, you know, are meant to be with you for life. So it's quite like a common small talk conversation, I guess. But yeah, I really dislike that one. But I've become pretty good at addressing it, I hope. Anyway, I did ask you lovely people what you would either want help on or experiences you have had. So someone said, and I was actually going to talk about this, so I'm glad that they said it. Someone said, people asking you how they died. Same, my love. It's weird. Sorry. Like, it's probably my one question that I'm like, you don't need to ask it. You really don't. Like, does knowing that information, especially in a small talk conversation, really going to help you be there for that person, be a good friend to that person? Even if you think that like you can see yourself being really good friend to that person, let them tell you, like when they're ready. That's not something you need to push out of someone, because also you never know, like it could not affect them at all telling you, but they might have never told someone before, or you don't know how fresh it is, and you don't know what telling you is going to do for them. And I just think it's just not a very necessary question, and it's for them to tell you. So I completely can relate to this question. It is so tricky to navigate. I mean, as I say, sassy young Frankie, and to be honest, me now, I just tell people because not in a, you know, again, sassy way. But sometimes now I'm just live life like, well, if you're asking, like you clearly want to know, so I'll tell you. But that's because I am okay to do that. Somebody else might not be. And I just want to put out there that just, you really don't need to know that information, because it could be the most painful, horrible thing for someone to say. And in my situation, mine's quite a quick reason and way that Matt passed away to say. But someone's might be really like long-winded and horrible to think about and remember and have to tell, firstly, a stranger. So yeah, I would just caution potentially away from that, as I personally think it shouldn't be a question you're asking. It should be something that you're ready to receive as a friend or a colleague or whatever, when that person is ready to tell you. In my personal experience and opinion, yeah, it can just be quite painful. And just to add on to that, sometimes when I tell people how Matt passed away, I think it's quite shocking to a lot of people, a young person in their 20s passing away from a heart attack. So then everyone's response is, what? Oh my God, that's awful. I've never heard of anything like that. And it's like, it's just followed. What I'm trying to say is the conversation followed by that is never going to be good. Do you think that's going to be like a nice continued conversation? Probably not. So anyway, yeah, it's a weird old question, but in a sense, there's also a part of me that does get it. We're all, well, not all of us, but I'm sure lots of us are quite nosy. I can definitely be nosy in other aspects of life, especially with my friends, because I just want to know everything so that I can be there for them. So in that aspect, I do really get it. But my just piece of advice would be, let them tell you. Okay, this is nice. Well, a good one to talk about. Someone said not knowing whether to bring it up or not, or to talk about something completely different. So this is obviously coming from a perspective of being around someone who is grieving, not from the perspective of the person grieving. This is a tricky one because, as I say, everyone's different, everyone grieves differently, and everyone craves different things. But my rule of thumb, and from my experience, and would just be, just approach it gently, just potentially go there. You will very quickly gauge, most of the time, if someone doesn't want to go there with you. You'll know, like, and then you just let it go. Don't probe, don't go any further, but just have that gentle nudge. Because also on the flip side for me, of potentially making someone slightly upset bringing it up, which has happened to me as well, and don't get me wrong, like sometimes it is like, oh, why did they have to bring it up? It happens very rarely in my case, because I talk about it a lot. But the flip side for me can be so huge and beneficial, of then they'll go, like a weight off their shoulders. Finally, someone's asked me. Finally, someone has had the courage to bring it up to me, especially in conversation. This sort of is giving me, conversation with potentially other people around as well. And sometimes I find like it's nice for someone else to bring them up than you always bringing them up all the time. And I feel that can be nice as well. But as I say, I think it's always better to than to not, because then you're giving an option. I'm literally going to sound like a broken record, but yeah, I think the option is always better than giving no option, because then they never have a choice to make in the matter of whether they do or don't want to speak about it. From my experience anyway. And don't get me wrong, there have been times where I'm really, really, really not in the mood to talk about it. And someone will bring it up and I'll bawl my eyes out and then it's a bit awkward. But 9 times out of 10, I'm really grateful that someone else has brought it up. And for that one time, which can be painful, the other times have been so comforting that personally, in my experience, I would take that one for the other 9 times. Okay, so someone has said, friend the same age as them is her lock screen photo, and people keep asking me if he's my boyfriend. Oh, yeah. Do you know what? I just want to give you a big hug, first of all, and say I've been there more times than I can count with something very, very similar. I still have, sorry, I just haven't got it on, because I've actually with time got more and more paranoid of losing it, breaking it, whatever. I have a necklace that my godmother made me in a heart shape, and it has literally matte written in it. So when I, obviously being 13 and getting given that, literally never took it off. It was like carrying him with me all the time. And when you sort of go to like 15, 16, 17-year-old parties and, whatever, the amount of people that would be like, oh my God, it actually happened with my friend Shah. And we do talk about it in our episode. And we laugh at it now. And I don't hold any anger towards conversations like this, but it's just like the connotations that get brought with it. Why? Just because it's a male like on my screen or a male name on my neck, why has that got to be my boyfriend? You never know. So yeah, I had that a lot with my matte necklace and people assuming, oh, that's your boyfriend. Oh my God. Like either they'd go, oh, so cute, or oh, so cringe. And then they're adding an opinion to that as well, which is always just a bit like, oh, actually, no, like sometimes I just would let them roll with it. Be like, yeah, I've got a boyfriend called Matt. And then in my head, I'm like, that's really weird. But most of the time, to be honest, I'd be like, oh no, actually, it's my brother who passed away. And it's just, again, awkward. The following conversation is just a bit like, I'm going to go inside now, uncomfy. Uncomfy situations, uncomfy conversations are what we're talking about. And that is probably up there with, I don't like that. Anyway, so lock screen, I can imagine is like the same. And it's just uncomfortable. It's the assumption as well of like, oh, it's your boyfriend. And then, as I said, like the opinion, the connotation that comes with it, oh, how cringe, how cute. And it's like, do I tell this person why they're on my lock screen? Like sometimes in your head as well, you're like, do they deserve to know after they've just said that to me? So I'm not sure how you have coped with that. But I just think just tell them. Because then in a sense, also it might, help them in the future to not jump to any conclusions with anyone else, was my view on it. Like if I was like, no, actually it's my brother who blah, blah. Maybe they'll just think a little bit deeper next time they add a cringe connotation to a really beautiful, nice thing that you've done. So keep as your lock screen. And please don't let that make you want to change it. And I'm sorry that you've been in those awkward, situations. They're not the best at all. Okay, last one. I'm going to have to go. I think it goes on into my DMs. I think when people ask, how are you doing? It's always tricky, as you know that they mean well. Pause. As you know that they mean well, but obviously you're not doing well. And also awkward because you don't know how honest to be with people when they ask you, and whether you're too honest, will they be uncomfortable? So true. This is such a great point. And I think it's finding that balance is really hard. Am I going to make this uncomfortable? But to be honest, it should be fine that it's uncomfortable because they've asked me. But then also, how are you is such just like a, hey, how are you doing? You know, you all right? Like, they're just pretty normal things. And sometimes people don't probably mean the question. And then sometimes you feel like you should just be like, yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you? I find I think we're all quite conditioned to be like, oh, I'm fine. Like, yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you? Polite and, yeah, I'm good. And I've actually really, especially this last year, I found this over Matt's anniversary. I literally was like, no, I'm not good actually. I've had a really bad 2, 3 days. I'm numb, I'm sad, I can't do anything, can't function. I'm really bad. And the response I actually got was really lovely. But obviously they were my close friends, close family. So does that carry a different energy to it? Potentially when someone's just like randomly asking you how you are. I feel like we should live in a space where we can actually just be honest and be like, oh, actually, like, I've not actually had a great day. Like, I'm good generally, but I've not had a good day. Or I'm generally not great, but weirdly, today's been a good day. Like, to be more honest. But then I do completely understand the flip side of, I do this as well. Like, if you're just meeting someone and it's a small talk, how are you? Most of the time, I'm just like, yeah, I'm good. Something I do keep saying at the moment is like, yeah, I'm really good, but I feel really busy and stressed. But I'm liking the stressed and busy because it's all good things. But I add just like a little bit more honesty to that question. But yeah, that's always a weird one. And it's weird. I think that's more gauging potentially who the conversation's with, where you are, like your setting, your environment, who you're speaking with, your relationship to them potentially, and whether you just are in the mood to go there. Because I've had it where I'm having a bad day, but I'm also really not in the mood to talk about that bad day. But then sometimes when people ask me, how are you? And I'm having a bad day, I'm like, oh my gosh, thank God you have just asked me because I'm about to tell you. So yeah, yeah. And sometimes you don't know whether they really mean, how are you? Or if it's the small talk, how are you? So it's a really weird one, really tricky. And that falls to so many different things, not just grief. That screams to all mental health and trauma and hard days, busy days, stressful days, emotional days. Yeah, that falls, I'm sure everyone can relate to that on some level of how honest to be with that question. But yeah, my advice would just be, see how you're feeling on that exact day with that exact person and just roll with it. And then if you feel like, yeah, actually, I'm going to be really honest, and they don't take it well, then their loss and you'll find someone who will. And that conversation clearly wasn't meant to happen because they weren't the person who's meant to be comforting you. And you also might find, if you're not honest, that person could have been great. I don't know. It's a weird one. As I say, maybe just gauge that vibe, that person, yeah, and how you're feeling. I think that's what's most important, is just see how you're feeling, see what you need in that moment. And if it feels just easier and right to just be like, yeah, actually, I'm good, don't want to talk about it with you, do that too. Both, just do whatever. But yeah, those are some weird, awkward conversations. I was trying to think of some other ones, but some of the ones I did think of, you guys put forward, which was great. But I don't really think I have any other that I can think of. Like, yeah, potentially another one is, when it's a big day for you and someone hasn't realised, and then they ask, how are you? Adding on to the how are you situation. That might add on to it because they're not aware that, it's actually a really tough day. And then you're like, oh, do I really tell them what's going on today? But yeah, no, I think those are some really good points. I think those are things that will help both sides of the conversation. I hope, and I really hope, you've taken something from this conversation, whether that's comfort, a piece of advice, not feeling so alone in these awkward situations and conversations that we all have, and just knowing that there's no judgment there and we're all just trying to do our best. And yeah, I hope you leave today's episode feeling less alone and just with a bit of comfort that, like, okay, other people have had this. I'm not alone. They get it. And sometimes people asking these questions aren't bad. They're not bad people. I don't mean to judge them, but it's painful and they can exist at the same time, And yeah, so just take what you're feeling in that day whenever these conversations come your way. Oh, that rhymed. And just go with how you're feeling, because then at that point, as long as you're being honest with yourself and how you're feeling, not too much else can go wrong because you're being true to yourself. But yeah, have a great day, and I really hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you soon. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Lost and Found with Frankie. If it's resonated with you, or if you've taken something from this episode, or if you've just sat down and enjoyed it, I'd be so grateful if you could rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Hit that follow button, and if you're watching me over on YouTube, please give it a like and subscribe. I really want to reach as many young people and teens who are dealing with grief, as I know firsthand how much hearing conversations like this can help. So if you know someone who could benefit from what we've talked about here today, please give it a share with them too. And come say hello on Instagram and TikTok at Lost and Found with Frankie. So thank you again for being in this space here with me, and I'll see you next time.